Live. Everywhere. On netrootsradio.com. David Waldman. Kagro. In the morning. Now, here's David Waldman.
Hey, good morning, everybody. How you doing? It is Wednesday, May 11th, 2022, and they're off. I don't know. I sound like the Kentucky Derby call somehow, starting this morning. It is time for another show, however. We should get some sort of bugle fanfare to go along with that, but I don't have anything. I need like a much larger soundboard. There are tabs you can have on this soundboard. I can put together other things too. I don't know. One day I'll go around collecting sound effects. A couple of people have sent me some great pages where we might download such things. But the only time it really occurs to me to use them is right in the middle of our fantastic background music, which would ruin everything. So, off to the races, so to speak, with another show. Lots to catch up on. I have received comment anyway, that yesterday's show was exceedingly dark. Did everybody feel that way? I think probably you had good grounds to say so it was, wasn't it? Thinking back on it, I don't know. Well, I was unregulated yesterday, but today I'm regulated as Greg Dworkin prepares to come by with his raft of sunshine and light. I mean, it's the war in Ukraine, it's pandemic, but, you know, somehow it's even better. Yes, that's true. And Greg has, oh, right, and it reminds me, we do have somewhere our old favorite enthusiasm sound effect, but still have to wait for the music to finish in order to effectively integrate that into today's reporting. But yeah, it was a little bit dark, wasn't it? Sorry about that, or maybe you're welcome for it, depending on whether you enjoyed it or not. Let's see. There's plenty more darkness where that came from. Don't you worry, there's an awful lot. It was a bit much yesterday. Coronavirus news continues unabated. I have checked for you each morning, how we're doing here in Loudoun County. I skip right over how the rest of the country is doing, how New York State, how New York City is doing. I'm sure they're doing fine. Loudoun County is the one I worry about, and continues to tick up each day. As I said the other day, we crept over the triple digits mark for the 7-day rolling average. 7-day average now up another, 13% to 165 on average over the last couple of days. But yesterday was, I think, 460 new cases. Is that right? 426 new cases yesterday on May. That would be May 9th. Okay. Oh, sorry. May 10th, 212 cases. So I guess everybody waited over the weekend to go and get tested on Monday/Tuesday, and up to 165 on average over the last 7 days. That puts us, by the way, if you want to go by way of comparison, like we're sitting next to that, of course, enormous Omicron spike. The Omicron spike doesn't tell us a great deal about it because it was such a huge, flare-up. Puts us at about February 8th, if you're talking downslope of the spike. Upslope of the spike puts us around December 19th. So community levels, I guess, around the December 19th of last year levels, just prior to this enormous Omicron spike, and I guess it could still happen as we are here. But for better comparison, I guess to look further back, prior to the Omicron spike, the last time the numbers were that high on a daily average was the downslope of the 2020 winter spike, the downslope being February 8th. So I guess early February is a lousy time, but a downslope time annually, at least in the 2 years that we've had the pandemic around. Otherwise, on the upslope side of that, it puts us around the same community levels that we had around January 17th or so, 2020. That would be heading into the Delta spike. I don't know if there's no reason to believe that we would be due for a May spike. Things haven't spiked in prior Mays, but, we might be dealing with something weird and new. Maybe as we all finally begin to get outside more often, things will calm down. I don't know. We'll see. But, right around 10 days after the insurrection, things were looking pretty grim all of a sudden. Although now, looking back with the Omicron spike on the chart, the Delta spike is like quaint. Oh, isn't that cute? We had a 7-day average at the peak of that spike of about 350 cases over a 7-day average, whereas the Omicron spike was closer to almost 900 daily average. So, just to put that in perspective. Anyway, you don't care about what's going on in Loudoun County, at least unless I force you to. The New York Times coronavirus tracker comes in my email each day. And let's see, New York City seems to be holding steady. Just by way of comparison, I'm worried about the triple digits. They had a 7-day average of 3,856 cases over the last 7 days. So that's a bit rough. New York State also holding steady at about 9,544 cases on average. The United States, slight increase, 5%, 77,000, just north of 77,000 cases. Only 165 or so of them here in Loudoun County. So, okay, it's a not so bad. It's a nicer place. Oh, my God. All of a sudden, well, back to the 80s. All right, well, plenty to catch up on today. There's more former guy news. There's more, well, I'm sure there's more Ukraine news. And speaking of which, Greg is here to deliver. It doesn't have to be the first thing on the plate. And plenty of darkness, which I might save for you for Friday, the day everyone wants to be most depressed. Okay. Well, good morning, Greg. How are you today? You aren't here for the show.
I'm fine. Where were you when the lights went out?
Yeah, it was a good question. Our internet went out last night. There
you go. That's why the darkness.
Right. That was it. In anticipation of that, my kids were in a dark and foul mood. Although, I suggested to them, you might go to bed. That would be something you could do at 12:30 a.m. To come to me and tell me the internet is out at 12:30.
Yeah, how would you know?
I mean, what do I care? Go to sleep. But and so they did. I don't think they're feeling any more refreshed for it, but
All right, well, I'll cheer you up. I'll give you some good news.
Yes, okay, great.
Charles Herbster, accused of groping 8 women, says the Huffington Post, loses Nebraska gubernatorial race.
That is good news. I like that.
Strong support of former President Donald Trump in the Nebraska race, and he didn't make it.
Yeah, all right. Well, the Brotherhood of the Hands there, that didn't work out. Good. I'm glad that Nebraskans have better sense than that.
Right. University of Nebraska Regent Jim Pillen won the race.
All right.
It was kind of a 3-way.
I don't think I care who wins, just who loses.
Right. Trump, who himself faces accusations of rape, assault, and harassment from even more women, called Herbster a fine man and said he's innocent of these despicable charges.
Oh, yeah, of course he is. Oh,
then,
or if he's not,
let's see,
that's awesome
in
too.
West Virginia, the Trumpy guy won. So that would be considered, Trump will certainly consider it a win for himself because
undefeated.
The establishment, which is to say the governor and Joe Manchin, was supporting the other guy. Here's the CNN story on that. Pissed off Manchin rails on Trump-backed candidate in House GOP primary. Last week, Manchin was angry. The Democratic senator had seen a TV ad run by GOP Representative Alex Mooney. That's the weird guy that won.
Oh, a Mooney. We don't like the Moonies. Okay.
Suggesting his Republican opponent, David McKinley, backed President Joe Biden's sprawling social spending agenda. So he called on McKinley and told him he'd be willing to cut a TV ad and call out Mooney, a rare move to insert himself into GOP primary. His candidate didn't win, so he's kind of annoyed. Mooney himself, again, is something of a nutcase, but, that's the Republican Party for you. Then there's Pennsylvania. GOP panics over possible Mastriano nomination. A guy named Doug Mastriano, who was behind the scenes very influential in trying to get Pennsylvania to overturn the election results.
Oh, yes.
Is with days to go, everybody's talking about the senatorial race because that's the one that includes Dr. Oz.
Oh, yes.
But
Wonderful.
Actually, Oz and one of the titans of industry types is locked in a death battle. And the third person in the race sneaking up is another nutcase who may actually win.
Hey.
So that's on the senatorial side, but on the gubernatorial side, Mastriano seems to be ahead and probably will win. And Republicans are worried. The headline here in Politico, Pennsylvania GOP panics over possible Mastriano nomination. Republicans are increasingly worried a ticket led by gubernatorial frontrunner Doug Mastriano could lead to defeat in November. And that means that if the nutcase wins the senatorial race for the Republican nomination and Mastriano heads the ticket, then actually the Democrats might be in pretty decent shape.
Yeah, well, if people who want normal candidates to win come out and vote, then yeah.
Yeah, well, you got to do that. So the Miami Herald is covering this South Carolina story, and it just occurred to me as I was reading those others this morning, and I tweeted about it. This is somebody Trump probably would have endorsed had he known about it.
No.
Too late now, though. Man dies of heart attack as he digs a grave to bury the woman he killed in South Carolina.
Oh, and the Miami Herald is covering it.
Yeah, he...
okay. I mean, that also is interesting. He killed somebody.
Well, that way you get to say Florida man, but it's really not something that took place in Florida.
No.
South Carolina. And so man's
Florida
accused
man,
of strangling a woman he lived with before he died of a heart attack, so Arma can't wait, that kind of thing.
I guess, yeah, holy cow. Well...
but I'm sure Trump would have endorsed him. He's this kind of candidate.
That's right. And plus he put his hands on a woman. There you go. So,
well, and again, that would have been an offhand remark, except for the other people we're covering that Trump, in fact, did endorse, like Herbster.
Yeah.
So, it's not out of character.
Not at all. The things you have to
worry about.
I like
a guy who's tough.
Yeah, that's right. He showed her who's boss.
He killed that lady, and I'm sure
Very
he's a good
strongly.
person, a fine
Very
person.
strongly.
He voted for me. What else do you need to know?
Right. That's not out of keeping with his character. He loves to do that. We have to ask these questions, like whether the other guy. There was another guy who won his Republican primary for a local office from jail for having killed his wife, and you have to ask whether, by any chance, he might also have cast her absentee ballot for himself.
Right. So two pieces here. One rather deep. I don't know if we'll have time for it, but the short one, again, from Politico. Inflation's biting, rose spraying. Dems are still trying to connect with voters, and it's a story about Katie Porter going to the grocery store and buying some bacon, but she put it in her cart until she noticed the price was $9.99 a pound, so she put it back, and then had a nice discussion with her Democratic colleagues about you got to be in touch with inflation and stop ignoring it. And don't tell me about polls. Tell me about what happens when you go shopping. Of course, most of the guys don't go shopping, so they have no clue. And that was really the point of the article. So she's pointing out that you really have to connect with your voters. Roe is a great way to do it, and we have more information about that. But another way, I suppose, is to point out, look, I mean, inflation's an issue, but at least we don't go around killing our spouses, which is, or putting hands on people or being otherwise pervs.
Yeah.
And, these are the folks that are actually winning the nominations in the Republican Party. And so you have a Todd Aiken problem.
Yeah.
And let's run on that. Plus Roe, and so there's reason to think that that might have some effect. But the deeper article here is by Tim Alberta in the Atlantic, how politics poisoned the evangelical church. The movement spent 40 years at war with secular America. Now it's at war with itself, and it's a whole story about individual pastors who are reasonably moderately center-right conservative, and the radicalization of their flock to the point where they themselves feel like they can't even work with their flock anymore.
They're flocked now.
So they're moving.
Oh.
On the other hand, some people really love the idea of having issues come up at the pulpit.
Yes. That's true.
Okay. And some of these pastors have been radicalized by their flock. And so, it's hard. And the flocks are preferring the ostentatious and loud people, but sort of the big mega churches.
It's very Christian. Yes.
Aren't doing quite as well in this era.
Well, A lot of people
right?
caught
So
coronavirus
Tim Alberta
there.
points out when Trump was elected, thanks to a historic showing among white evangelicals, 81% voted for him over Hillary Clinton. The victory was rightly viewed as the apex of the movement's power, but this was in many ways the beginning of its unraveling. The battle lines described as having emerged over the past 5 years: cultural reckoning over racism and sexual misconduct, lethal pandemic, disputes over vaccines, mandates, allegations of election theft, and the siege of the Capitol. And underlying all of this, the presidency, prosecution, and martyring of Trump himself have carved up every institution in American society, and the evangelical church is no exception. The largest denomination, the Southern Baptist Convention, is bleeding members because of ferocious infighting over race relations, women serving in leadership, accountability for sexual misconduct. United Methodist Church, America's second largest denomination, is headed toward imminent divorce over irreconcilable social and ideological divisions. Smaller denominations are losing affiliate churches as pastors and congregations break from leadership over many of the same cultural flashpoints, choosing independence over associating with those who do not hold their views. So perhaps it shouldn't be surprising that Christians, like Americans from every walk of life, are self-selecting into cliques of shared habits and thinking. But what's notable about the realignment inside the white evangelical church is its asymmetry. Pastors report losing an occasional liberal member because of the refusal to speak on Sunday mornings about bigotry, but those same pastors report having lost significant portions of their congregation because of complaints that they and their staff don't advance right-wing political doctrine. Hard data are difficult to come by. Churches are not required to disclose attendance figures, but a year's worth of conversations with pastors, denominational leaders, evangelical scholars, and everyday Christians tells a clear story. Substantial numbers of evangelicals are fleeing their churches, and most of them are moving to ones further to the right. So, I mean, the whole concept here, we've been talking about the show for years about this being a white evangelical nationalist problem, is in fact showing up in the churches themselves. So Alberta writes, Christianity has traditionally been seen as a stabilizing, moderating influence on American life. Maybe. In 1975, more than two-thirds of Americans expressed a lot of confidence in the church. Today, that's 37%. This downward spiral owes principally to two phenomena: the constant stench of scandal, with megachurches and prominent leaders imploding on what seems like a weekly basis, and the growing perception that Christians are embracing extremist views. One rarely needs to read to the bottom of a poll to learn the religious group most opposed to vaccines, most convinced the 2020 presidential election was stolen, most inclined to subscribe to QAnon, is white evangelicals. Well, you know that, because we talk about it on the show all the time.
Well,
and other pastors feel trapped. One stray remark could split their congregation or cost them their job. The Whisper campaign brand conservative pastors as moderate and moderate pastors as Marxist. In this environment, a church's leader's stance on biblical inerrancy is less important than whether he's considered woke. His command of scripture is less relevant than suspicion about how he voted. So what percentage of the church would you say are grappling with the issues? A pastor asked me the other day, me, Tim Alberta, and I said, 100%. All of them.
Oh, I was kidding. All right.
Right?
100 is true.
Yeah. So
or
pretty
what
interesting.
Tim thinks, anyway. All right. Cool. I'm an expert now. I guess the same as
the article is quite long and goes on to talk a lot of important things. But, the question is, what happens to them? I would love to them to get disillusioned, but the only way they're going to get disillusioned is to outvote them. Right? You have to know who they are. You have to recognize that they're going to come out and vote no matter what. And that's why all the whining about, Democrats aren't fighting hard. And, screw that. Look at these folks. They're coming out and voting every single election. What are you doing? And stop whining.
Okay.
I mean, you're probably right. Democrats aren't doing enough. So what? What's that got to do with who you're going to vote for?
Well, I mean, a lot, but
why?
Well, because
look at
people
the
like
issues
to,
on the table.
Yeah, but people like to feel if they're how people
like to feel. Get out and vote. Look what's going on.
For who? Right. I understand when people say, "Okay, I'll vote." I'm not voting for the people who aren't doing anything. I'm not going to vote for the people who are actively screwing
Just vote
me.
for them.
Yeah, I mean, I do, but
right? Or as somebody said
I
on Twitter,
understand when
listen,
they say
voting
that.
isn't a Valentine and it's not a marriage proposal. It's public transportation. You got to do it to get where you're going.
Yeah, all right. Well, that's certainly a better way of thinking about it. I mean, that's the way I think about it, but there are certainly people who say, all right, fine, I'll do it, but come on already. I don't understand why I
Now,
send
if you want to
people who do
volunteer for a
nothing.
campaign, fall in love with the candidate. But, we're just
Yeah.
talking about voters here.
Or I guess you could run and be one of those people,
Or you
although
could
you'll
run.
find out very quickly why
Why
things
people don't love
happen.
you. But
Yeah,
that's okay. You don't want them to love you. You want them to vote for you.
right. And that's true. But yeah, although it's a great experiment if you can actually, stand it to go and do those things, pledging to yourself, I won't be one of those candidates who gets elected and then does nothing. And then you'll find out very quickly how hard it is to actually get things done. And it's not always because there's any plot against you. It's just, it's hard to wrangle 435 people in the House into doing anything.
Well, it's just, I wish I could credit the person who came up with this because it's a pretty good analogy. So, yeah, it's public transportation. And if the bus doesn't go where you're going, take the bus that gets closest to where you're going and then get out and walk.
Yeah. All right. That is a pretty good analogy. Let's say I did that one. Possibly.
Or call an Uber or whatever.
Yeah. Okay.
Do whatever you want. But, just don't sit home.
That's true.
Get where you need to go.
No, you can't do that. It doesn't work. And there's no valor in it, and nobody recognizes your virtue. They just get upset with you about not participating in the dirty work.
Right.
Okay.
So, how are things going with the public? Well, William Salatin is an interesting piece here. Again, he's writing for the Bulwark now, Lord Salatin.
Oh.
The two-word question that could decisively shape abortion politics and what the polls tell us about it. And you know what those two words are.
I'm trying to think, but I might not.
And those two words are not Donald Trump. Those two words are
It's a two-word
who decides.
question. Who? Oh, okay. All right.
Right? You cut through all the crap about, well, the polling shows nuance and this and that and everything else. And right-wing people will say, yes, but look, there's everybody's in the middle and nobody's the absolutist abortion on demand and at the same time no abortion ever. Everybody's in the middle, and where are your restrictions in that? No, that's not the issue at all. That just confounds things. Everybody's icky about it, squeamish about it. It's not easy. The point is, who decides? Who do you trust to make the decision, the pregnant woman or a state legislator? Who decides? That's the two-word question. Mm-hmm. And when it comes down to that, people feel like it ought to be between their, themselves and their doctor and not some state legislator somewhere. In fact, The Hill has a piece today, and this is based on a Morning Consult poll that just came out this morning. 58% new poll favor candidate who supports abortion access. Mm-hmm. Okay. Yeah, you can take your subtlety and your nuance and you can put it right here.
Don't, though.
Forget about it. Put it where the sun don't shine. The issue is here. Who decides?
Yeah. Well, it used to be the conservative position when the issue was health care more broadly, that you and your doctor should decide. But now, of course, well, the gimme-tarian position. Oh, I found out it's actually
58%,
easier.
58%. That's pretty powerful, though.
Yeah, that's good. I mean, that's a fairly significant majority, if those matter anymore. But, that's why you got to fight about these gerrymanders and all sorts of voter intimidation, et cetera, can whittle away at that, and that's their hope, to get it down below 50 by eliminating 8% of voters.
Debbie Stabenow, Senator Stabenow, repeated a 1989 message word for word. The ultimate question becomes, who decides? Who decides our most intimate healthcare decisions? When there's a 12-year-old that's been raped, who decides that? Mitch McConnell? Right-wingers in the United States Supreme Court? Republicans in Congress and in state legislatures? Who decides what happens to the child? Their family? The doctor? All those that care and know the child? Or a bunch of politicians? That's what this is about. Who decides?
Yes.
It's your decision. And so that's why the poll says people favor politicians who support abortion access. And it isn't a question, well, yes, well, I'm going to push you to tell me what are your exceptions. Mm-hmm. Firstly, it's none of your business. And secondly, it doesn't matter.
I guess.
Because You don't know what your exceptions are until you're actually in that situation, which is always going to be nuanced and different than what you thought it was going to be, and you'll feel about it differently than you thought it was going to be.
Mm-hmm.
That's like asking people about end-of-life issues, which I know all about because, I dealt with it, as part of my career, let alone my family.
Right.
And you can't decide in advance exactly what's going to happen and how you're going to feel until you are there. You don't know. You may think you know. You don't.
Mm-hmm.
And so, the point is, give people slack, let them have some leeway, and don't commit them to an absolutist position. So I guess I'm, with all those people who say, yes, well, forget about the absolute position. You don't know how you're going to feel, but the point is you need those choices. So that's what makes me pro-choice.
Okay. I can accept that. That's it. I mean, it's a good speech, a good reason to use it over again. Yes.
And it worked politically. It should work politically this time.
Okay. Well, I hope so. And I don't know. A lot of crazy people out there in the evangelical
here's
churches.
Axios.
Yes.
Republicans are deeply split on their abortion strategy, with top officials pushing restraint, even silence, while activist GOP candidates demand an all-out campaign for a national ban and harsher penalties.
Sure.
Think about the Republican leadership the same way you think about the pastors in the church.
Okay.
Right? The radical flock wants him up there with fire and brimstone about liberals and gays, gays, capitalized. And the leaders are saying, I don't know that I want to do this. And the flock is pushing them. Well, same way with the Republicans in the GOP base. Republicans are deeply split because the leadership thinks one thing and the base thinks something else. And as Axios does, they sort of bullet point everything. Why it matters?
Yes.
Republicans' confidence in landslide victories this fall was shaken by the leaked abortion ruling. A top advisor to House Republican leaders tells Axios the polling shows in races that matter, voters aren't, quote, hip to this kind of seismic change, end quote. Nice to know they're not hip.
Yeah. What is hip? Okay. Well, hey kids, there's a history lesson in this for you. You can look it up on Urban Dictionary. People used to say that all the time. All right. Well, 23 Skidoo. We'll be right back.
Thank you, fellow kids.
Sup, fam? It's your boy Darwin, aka Darwin_Darko, aka the most reasonable man in America, aka KITM's senior black correspondent. You might remember me from such recordings as Spacemen vs. Space Cadets and We Need to Talk About Joe Biden. Today, I want to bring you good news about that thing you've been struggling with. Do you suffer from giving too much of a damn? Do you turn on the series of tubes and find yourself outraged at the particular way some news organization strung some sentences together only to realize, nope, this is not some fictional hellscape? Well, guess what? You no longer have to accept the life of giving too much of a damn. You can do something about it, because even you, yes you, can be a show contributor. Now I know what you're thinking. Hey, Mr. Most Reasonable Man in America, I'm not some professional podcast talking guy. Don't worry about it. Do you have a smartphone or some other electronic recording device? Well, that's all you need. You too can have a segment where you can read us an important article and give us your take. Read one of your own original essays, or even just give us your commentary on something you'd like to share that's important to you. Fair warning though, side effects may include general punditry, having opinions and hot takes, getting stuff off your chest, and hearing your own voice. If your recording lasts longer than 5 to 7 minutes, please consult kagrox@gmail.com. That's KAGROX@gmail.com.
All right, welcome back now to the Kagro in the Morning Show here on Netroots Radio. There's more horrific news somewhere. All right, we're not done with the horrific Axios.
Yeah, it's 4 o'clock.
Why
somewhere.
It's horrific.
So Axios says, it matters for a lot of reasons. The GOP establishment's initial marching orders counseled caution and even silence, but activist candidates and voters couldn't care less what the establishment wants. You have to remember, the GOP base hates their leaders except for Trump.
Yes, including Ted Cruz, who thinks he can capitalize on the fact that they hate their leaders, but they also hate him.
Yeah. They hate everybody. So, it's the party of hate. And so that generally doesn't work out in the long term, but we don't always have long term to wait. So the activist candidates and voters couldn't care less what the establishment wants and see this as a moment to fulfill their lifelong dream of strict abortion bans. And that's why you have all these wackos running and winning their Republican primaries. what we're hearing, Tony Perkins, president of the Family Research Council, you probably haven't heard that name in a long time, who's been fighting on the issue for 30 years, told me in a phone interview there's some caution about overreach among GOP leaders, but they're promising to help push America to be a predominantly pro-life nation, Perkins said. What to watch? Click Political Reports Dave Wasserman points to swing state Nevada, which has toss-up Senate and governor's races. The GOP needs suburban voters, but the party's base is pushing hard for even more restriction. So the more the establishment pushes something, the more the base recoils.
Okay.
That's just the way it is. The Washington Post has a story, Gary Peters talking about this, says there's certain states that have even stronger support for Roe v. Wade, New Hampshire, Nevada, and Arizona, for example, as places where party researchers showed particular salience for abortion rights. Now, those are swing states, so that matters. And there's very clear contrast between where our candidates are in those states and the Republican candidates who've taken, for the most part, very extreme views. And so, candidates in those states are running on this stuff. Maggie Hassan in New Hampshire immediately moved to put abortion rights at center of her reelection campaign. And in that morning consult poll that the Hill was referring to, it turns out that abortion rights, whereas the economy and economic issues is still 40%, people say it's the most important issue. The others, like war in Ukraine and national security, et cetera, abortion is like right up there, tied for number 2 with 3 or 4 other things. And it just sort of shot up compared to other weeks. So, yes, it has salience and it's changing. And this leak of the draft opinion was only last week. And so that's not going away. It's just going to get more and more as people get angrier and angry about what they're seeing. And having all of these races where Republicans are flat out saying, I'm the most radical candidate, I'm the one that wants to ban the most things, running loudly and winning their primaries is only going to help Democrats.
Yes. Well, hope so. Oof. We're certainly seeing plenty of it. Where was it?
Yeah, I mean, maybe not in South Carolina, maybe not in Alabama, but certainly in the swing states.
Yeah, elsewhere as well. What do we down in Georgia where they're having a gubernatorial race, three-way Republican
Mo Brooks
primary
is not
for
leading.
that. That's true. I know the crazy lady from Georgia isn't leading either, but she is shaking up the race with her. What was it that she had on her bus? Like babies, guns, Jesus. That was her
something
platform.
like that.
President
But
on the
Georgia's going to be Brian Kemp.
Yeah, and all like that.
Mo Brooks in Alabama, he's in second place. So I mean, even in the deep red states like Alabama, the nuttiest people aren't necessarily the ones on the top.
Okay,
but they're loud enough so everybody knows what's going on, and so it's not hard to tie and associate the crazy with the Republican Party.
Good. Well,
yes, the Democrats have to do that. Again, like I said before, stop whining about what Democrats are doing and get in there and, help them.
Help associate. That's their favorite. That's
it's the social media. That's what you do.
Yes.
It's not their job. That's your job.
Oh, okay. Well, I'm working on it, and everyone can work with me. People like that, and that's a uniting front. That's a sort of thing that very frequently, sometimes people who say, I need to see Democrats fight, that's the fighting they're talking about. Not actually necessarily fighting for policy change. But, okay, well, I
want to see them loud on Twitter with a meme. Fine, help them. Make one.
All right. I will. I'm not a great meme person necessarily. Or at least,
I'm just talking to the greater audience.
All right, then. Greater than me.
Less complaining, more roll up your sleeve and get the work done.
All right. Well, there for that.
Don't mourn, organize.
Yeah. And you can boo and then vote, by the way, though.
Sure. You can hold your nose and vote, too.
Yeah. All right. Well, okay. We'll do a lot of that.
Just,
There'll be plenty of it to go around.
Anyway, let's
anything else in the world, the entire world, anywhere? Okay. That place.
Yeah. I sent you this really remarkable picture that Chinese television caught of Ukrainians blowing up a Russian tank with the turret flying in the air.
Yeah. Why does it do that? It just does.
It does because it's a jack-in-the-box tank, because they have the ammunition directly below the turret, so as soon as it gets hit, the ammo goes and launches the turret.
Yeah, I guess can you?
And that's why the Victory Day parade in Russia should have had turretless tanks.
Right. I guess so. That's pretty. Now, I mean, it's hard to see.
I sent you the one where the turret tank looks like a skull or looks like a brooch.
Yeah, I saw that. It's weird. It's very I imagine it was supposed to be very intimidating looking.
Well, it is scary. It looks very goth.
Yeah, but I guess if it just
but if you're a Russian tanker, it's even more intimidating if you're still around to see it, because the tankers do not survive those things.
No, I imagine not.
Abrams tanks in America are built so that if you get hit, you survive.
That's nice for the people inside.
Well, yeah. Well, the most important part of a tank is the tankers, right? Because then you can put them in another tank.
Yeah, I know.
You can't do that with Russian tanks because, you don't survive this.
Right, but in Russia, we'll just make more tankers.
That's what they think.
Yeah, these days it's not so easy.
Not so easy. So what's going on there? Well, this is Jack Detch, who's the Pentagon correspondent for Foreign Policy, the magazine.
Yes.
Who writes up yesterday's briefing. A senior U.S. defense official wrapped up a briefing of an hour ago with an update on Russia's war. Here's some of the most important notes. U.S. believes Russia's honed in on the northern line of advance out of Izium into the Donbass, but 2 other advances have stalled due to Ukrainian resistance. And Russia's now up to 99 battalion tactical groups, although like with the pandemic, trying to count cases, it doesn't mean what it used to mean. I don't think it means what you think it means, because a battalion tactical group may or may not have demoralized partially outfitted members, partially trained, a whole bunch of other things. So not all BTGs are equal in that regard. So Russia's added about 15 BTGs into Ukraine in the past 2 weeks, but it's not clear the units are in great shape.
All right.
In fact, the Wagner group, which is one of their mercenary groups, is asking for more help. More military aid is pouring in. Russia still has majority of its combat power. Weeks ago, that number was 75%. It's not quite that high anymore. Maybe 65% of ground forces have been already sent to Ukraine. The U.S. believes that Russia has fired 10 to 12 hypersonic weapons into Ukraine in the past 2 months, but it's sort of random. Now they're doing it from low-flying bombers. Russian ships have moved further away from Odessa. They're afraid to come close to the shore because of the Neptune missiles. Yeah. And in fact, Snake Island, they're taking a beating on Snake Island every time they try to land there. Ukrainians sort of intercept them and take care of it. And I have a nice little piece about how and why that is. Ukraine's airspace remains contested, and Russian aircraft are wary of venturing in. So they're running more sorties, but the sort of random strikes that aren't coordinated with anything. Bigger picture, where is this headed? U.S. believes Russia's 2 weeks behind where they're supposed to be, but Putin's still striving to create a land bridge to Crimea, which other than Mariupol, he's pretty much done. And Kyiv is still on the table for him. So Kremlin could leverage a Russian foothold into the Donbass to push deeper into Ukraine again, but not clear that they can. But that remains a possibility and a negotiating point.
Okay. I don't know what the big push for Snake Island is. I'd stay out of any place named Snake Island, frankly.
You'd think so, but if you have a foothold there, then you can shoot into Ukraine from there, and you can shuttle troops from there. And so if you can't get there from land, you try to get there by sea.
Yeah.
The trouble is, Russia's always been, as far as their armed forces go, where the U.S. is sort of a balanced Army, Navy, and Air Force. The Russians are predominantly a ground force. They use their Navy to support the ground force. They use their Air Force to support the ground force, but they don't really integrate the three very well. And they are not equal in terms of resources and capabilities. So they're very capable of shooting a lot of missiles and artillery, and they have tanks, and generally they get where they're going on the ground. But if you scare the Navy off by sinking a few ships and keeping them at a range of land-based missiles, with them getting even more sophisticated with missiles from the West, you've basically neutralized the Navy. And as far as neutralizing the Air Force, they're not neutralized, but they certainly do not have unconditional, uncontested airspace control. That's what the U.S. got when they had this war with Iraq a few years back, and it made all the difference in the world.
Yes.
Because then the anti-tank helicopters could just go kill whatever they wanted.
True.
Without anybody contesting it. Russians can't do that.
Yeah, that's what convinced everybody that no-fly zones were easy.
Yeah.
So
Not easy. Nothing, logistics are easy. Well, actually, no-fly zones and logistics are basically only the U.S. can do it. So here's a really interesting look at the concepts behind that. First of all, this one is from Trent Telenko, remember, our favorite expert on logistics and tires.
Mr. Tire, yeah.
Right? There's going to be a long thread here, so we'll sum it up.
Okay.
But the meme is never ask a woman her age, a man his salary, or a Ukrainian artillery crew where they got the targeting data.
Huh, okay.
So the thing is,
that's
Ukraine has a homegrown concept where they use their own programming, not European, not anybody else's. They have software package written by a specific guy that he identifies, Ukrainian. And the software package is reminiscent of Uber or Lyft, except it's for artillery. Right? And then what they do is they find the nearest target and then assign it to the nearest gun, mortar, rocket launcher, or drone.
I'll take that for $5. Okay?
And then so it makes it harder for the Russians. We talked the other day about the fact that now that the Ukrainians have artillery that fires a further distance,
yes,
you can shoot at the Russians and then move it so the Russians can't shoot back. But there's another problem that the Ukrainians basically had perfected even before they got the longer range artillery.
Mm-hmm.
Instead of having one gun shoot, let's say, at a tank, you have, this just showed up on my app on the phone. You have 5 different places shoot at the tank. As they're circling, you call Uber and the car, you could see the cars circling your apartment, which one's closest.
Right.
This one's 2 minutes away. That one's 2.5 minutes away. This one is 4 minutes away. The point is, if you have all 5 of them try to get to your house, one of them's going to get there first, but you don't know which one. And so if you have 5 different people respond to this particular program and shoot the tank, the Russians don't know who to shoot back at. Which of the 5? They don't have the capability to shoot back at all 5, let alone one. So you got to figure these 5 places, shoot at the tank and then move real quickly, and the Russians can't respond. And that's basically the strategy that the Ukrainians have been using to take out these assets, as they like to say.
How interesting.
Sanitizing it. Although if
like
you
Uber,
see
like Tinder?
The turret blow up in the air, it's not so sanitized.
Yeah. Well,
so it's really very interesting. And, again, it's, learning how to fight when you have to. And a lot of it is because they're using good satellite data.
Yes.
Which I think is coming from private companies.
In many cases, there's a weird role that private companies with that sort of data are playing, and
it's fascinating. And between that and open source intelligence, or OSINT as it's called, it's really changing the way war is being waged. War games are being played, so to speak, except it's not a game. And you got to keep up. You got to pay attention and incorporate this into what you're doing.
Yeah, it's been pretty fascinating. We've talked about a number of the unusual uses of technology, unexpected uses of technology. The private companies are definitely doing strange things. I saw reports a while back that on Google Maps, I guess Google Maps used to blur out certain strategic Russian placements, Air Force bases, etc. And I guess they've unblurred some of these things, which seems like a clear signal to the Ukrainians that this is here for you. Just some. I don't know if I've ever seen that confirmed anywhere, and I don't know where to search for Russian aircraft, but I guess people who do are able to find it in ways that they used to not be able to. And I love these applications and the idea of all the same technology that makes Uber work. Is there any sort of surge pricing analogy that we can make? I guess not, but just here's some targets, and there's people out there on, TaskRabbit to getting $5 for spotting tanks and gun emplacements and putting them on the Uber apps so that the mobile artillery can fire at them. It's really incredible.
Right,
and,
but you have everybody playing, so it's like Pokemon Go except for war.
Yeah, right. It's kind of crazy, and I guess maybe we're learning also that prior to the open warfare, years ago when everybody feared the Russian hacking abilities, and it was something to be feared, something to worry about. It was creating chaos here in the United States. I get the sense that maybe a lot of these, the top level people who were leading it were Russian, but maybe the programmers and hackers were chiefly Ukrainian. And they've gone home, and it's left them without the brain trust in Russia that was supposed to be their advantage in modern warfare. But people moved back and forth very often between Ukraine and Russia before Russia said, we're going to make a clearer dividing line. We'll try to absorb you, but...
In Ukraine, Ukrainians hack Russia. In Russia, Russians hack you.
Yeah. Oh, okay. And it's not working out for them. I thought that they would have greater capabilities in it, but I think maybe the brain trust was all Ukrainian.
Well... it is what it is, and so we're seeing it in real time. It's just fascinating stuff. Here's one from War on the Rocks, which is quite good, and it talks about the intelligence and the run-up to the war. And, it starts out, their main point is every descent into war comes with speculation, accusations, and counter-accusations of intelligence failure. Who lost China? And indeed, it's obvious to note that intelligence agencies are most often criticized when things go wrong. Politicians especially enjoy the, you listen and read long enough, you learn to really dislike politicians.
All right.
I mean, I like what they're trying to do, and they're the vehicle to get it done. But I don't love politicians.
Okay, fair enough.
Politicians especially enjoy the deflective properties of the term intelligence failure. It redirects attention for political decisions toward the usually anonymous technocrats of the intelligence world. Community as consistently doubted and demonized in the public discussions as it is lauded and lionized. Since the Bush administration's dissembling of Iraq's weapons of mass destruction, intelligence communities derided the public use of intelligence products. Once bitten, twice shy. The role of intelligence during the run-up and since the invasion of Ukraine represents an entirely different chapter, however, and for two distinct but related reasons. First, the year preceding the Russian invasion represents a resounding and instructive success in a branch of intelligence more notorious for its miscall, strategic warning intelligence. Second, decades of growing public transparency about intelligence paired with unprecedented transformation in the capability of open source intelligence make it possible for politicians, diplomats, and defense communities to reveal, challenge, and warn of Russia's warlike preparations. So in this discussion, and we won't go through the whole thing, but I'm just sort of floating the concept here, we'll pay particular attention to initiatives taken by the UK, the US, and some of Europe's smaller states whose effective use of warning intelligence allowed Western states to confront Russia and support Ukraine well in advance of February 24th, which was Invasion Day.
Yes, so second Invasion Day, but yes.
Successful warning offered lead time to assist, equip, and train Ukrainians in their defensive preparations. Western governments were willing to declassify information to support warnings. They and media organizations drew from open source intelligence instead of referring obliquely to unspecified secret sources, and it made it possible to seize the initiative from Russian attempts at denial, deception, and prevarication. The West was very good at that, right? The pre-buttles and the excuses, the denazification, it all fell flat. Russia propaganda completely failed with outside of Russia sources. Yes. It failed so much that Russian apologists then said, well, of course, this was all internal. Okay. We never tried to influence the rest of the world. This was all only at our, of course it wasn't only. It was just such a big failure you couldn't even make the case they were trying.
Okay. Yeah.
So while the invasion could perhaps not be prevented, this live case study represents a step change that demonstrates the positive use of intelligence for impact. Right? So always interesting. However, before you pat yourself on the back about how well the West did, this is a piece in Politico with an exclusive interview with the foreign secretary, I think. Yes, okay. Ukraine's youngest ever foreign minister at 41, a fellow named Dmytro Kuleba, casually looked up to the sky through a cloud of his own cigar smoke as the air raid sirens went across Kyiv.
Okay.
This just demonstrates the depths of all their hatred toward us, he said, but we're winning. We won the battle for Kyiv. We're not as dumb as you might think, and our army proved it pretty efficient. And with that efficiency, we finally won the trust of the United States. But he let it be clear that he believes if the U.S. and other Western allies had only trusted Kyiv more and provided the weapons Kyiv requested in the months prior to the invasion, thousands of lives may have been saved. Our partners were reluctant. Basically, they agreed to send Soviet-era equipment on the pretext that it would take the Ukrainians a long time to train. That pretext is gone. They're now getting modern Western arms and using them, and using them very well. And it's true. Until they survived the first 3 days, the West was a little reluctant and unwilling to get on board, especially places like Germany.
Yeah.
But also the U.S. But once they survived and actually looked like they were holding their own, things geared up pretty quickly. So it wasn't a perfect response in the West. She's quite right about that. I don't know that it could have gone any quickly. Again, take Germany as an example. They were basically a disarmed pacifist state like Japan dating back to World War II. That's changed, but you can't expect that to change overnight.
Yeah. Well, even for the United States, I mean, I guess I could see, if I'm really involved in that debate, shouldn't we be sending our most up-to-date arms? Like, well, if they stand up and they, if they can last a while, then maybe, yeah. But I mean, if they're going to be overrun, whose hands do we want this stuff to fall into? Not theirs, not Russia's.
Right. You don't want to give it to the Afghan army and then just have the Taliban take it the next day.
Yeah,
we already done that.
We have experience with that, right? So do the Russians. So, yeah, I mean, I understand the reluctance. It's not that we thought they were dumb. I don't think I've never heard anybody say
they weren't dumb, but they
Ukrainians
completely miscalculated
Russians,
Ukrainian resolve and efficiency.
Mm-hmm. I mean, maybe there's a thing. Do Russians make, like, Ukrainian jokes? It's possible.
Russians make a lot of Ukrainian jokes, and like they're not very pleasant. Right, pretty racist.
Yeah, like I'm wondering if there's well, it's not us thinking you're dumb. Maybe the Russians, not us. But we also had this other problem where for a lot of the period of time that you're talking about, the president was Russian and thought that you were dumb and that you were corrupt, and that's why he was withholding weaponry from you. It wasn't necessarily.
Well, again, some of this goes back to Donald Trump and the thing that got him impeached the first time.
Yes. Right. Yeah. I mean, we remember that too. We're not as dumb as you Ukrainians think we are. I mean, it looks like it. I know because we elected.
Well, some of us are because they voted for him.
Well, yeah. I mean, I can't deny
and they voted
that,
for him again.
Some
and they voted against impeachment. So some of us are that though.
Yes, but they're them, not us.
So, the question on the table, which still doesn't have an answer, is, we support Ukraine. In fact, a lot of us support Ukrainian military doing even more. They're doing great in the Kharkiv area. And, at what point and what do we consider winning? Is it pulling back to 2020 lines? Is it pulling back to 2014 lines? And how much, given the fact that Ukraine is in a position to push Russia back to its borders, which they're basically doing up in the Kharkiv area.
Yes.
Where does it stop?
Moscow.
Do you risk pushing Russia too close to defeat that they feel like they have to use chemical and nuclear weapons? Because Putin can't lose. If he loses, it's his neck.
Yeah.
I mean, these are real-life questions on the table that the diplomats are wrestling with.
Yes. You said it was unanswered. I guess I don't have an answer for you. Yeah,
but
I don't know.
That's part of the worry.
No.
So, we want them to win, but we don't want them to win that much.
Right. We want them to win.
We don't want them to invade Moscow.
Yeah, no, we don't. You don't need that to happen. I don't think the Ukrainians have any interest in having that happen.
No,
I'm sure they love
don't.
To
but they certainly don't have any interest of pushing Russia to use chemical and nuclear weapons.
No, I doubt that very much. Yeah. So I don't know. I mean, I guess
how real is it? I don't know. Is their nuclear capability really what we thought it was, and would they actually do that? Nobody knows, and that's part of the problem.
Right. All those missiles might fly around like a balloon you let go of. Just. Who knows where it lands? Although that's a problem for everybody. Yeah, I don't know. I mean, I imagine. Do we have to answer? I don't.
No, okay. We don't. But I'm just
Great.
saying. It's part of the issue here is in rooting for one side. It's like, what are you rooting for exactly?
I'm rooting for a good outcome, and when it happens, I'll be happy. I don't know. Yeah. I mean, I guess probably people would settle.
I can't tell you what it is, but I know it when I see it because it works for the Supreme Court.
Yeah. Yeah.
That's the Potter Stewart rule.
Pretty much. Yeah, and it's realistic in this situation. My guess is the world, and this is sad, Ukrainians probably would fume about this, but they are too busy right now. The world would say, all right, well, you can have, if you get back everything but the Crimea.
Well, the easy answer is,
win.
Zelensky and the Ukrainians will decide what winning is, not us.
Yeah, that's true.
And that's true, but still doesn't answer the question.
There may come a time where we have to say, I'm not saying that you're as dumb as you think we think you are, but you should stop now. And they might not want to. And that'll be interesting, true, right? Well, you've taken back all the territory you lost. Well, not this. Yeah, well, couldn't you let that go, right? I don't know. So whether that's Donbass, whether that's Crimea, I don't know. I guess we'll find out. And it'll be interesting, too, to see that we'll have this fight over weapons again. We think you should stop. Well, we don't think we should stop. Well, we think we should stop sending you weapons. Well, we still have enough for now. Okay. Be careful out there, please. All right. Well, that is tough. Can't answer it. It just, I don't know. You're right. Probably things will just fall into place and we'll accept it because we don't know enough about what to, how to steer the direction of things in Ukraine. We'll just have to trust
we just
Zelensky
approved $40 billion to send. The House did that. Senate probably not far behind. And it's just so weird that we are so into democracy in Ukraine, but not so much here.
Yeah. Not $40 billion worth anyway. I mean, yeah. Well, and not to mention, of course, I'm sure others are saying, it is interesting how quickly we can find $40 billion with no debate for certain kinds of things.
Yeah.
The things where people get
and we
killed.
did for COVID when COVID was like Omicron peak.
Yes, right. And now
we can't find it now because Republicans want to play politics and make it about Title 42 and get some, midterm election juice out of immigration.
Yes, juice. Yeah, that's true. And that reminds me about COVID. I'm beginning to see these predictions. I don't know where they're coming. I guess out of CDC saying that we're due for another. They expect
that's because the vaccines
winter.
are going to wear off.
Okay, another winter surge.
Yeah, you could predict it because if people think that it's over, they're not going to get boosters when they're told to get boosters or asked to get boosters or suggested to get boosters, however you put it. And the vaccines will wear off because that's what they do. That's why we get a flu shot every year, and you should get used to that concept. Yeah. And so people get mad and not get their boosters, and if the public is unvaccinated, then you're going to have another spike.
Crap. Well, we don't want that. Isn't that interesting, though?
Pretty straightforward. I mean, this is not an intelligence failure.
It's just the flu, and then it finally is kind of like the flu, and then people won't do it.
Except worse. Yeah, exactly.
Okay. Well,
anyway,
we'll check
that's
in again
it
tomorrow.
For today. That's it for the show for the first hour. David will be back after the break, and I'll be back tomorrow.
Okay. All right, welcome back now to the Kagro in the Morning Show here on Netroots Radio. Golly, there's a lot, and we have filled up the first hour, and we haven't even gotten to the hurricane gun. Do you believe that? Yeah, that was, I guess, the TFG story of the day, but there's a couple different angles on it, and let me see which ones are the ones we have to work with. The real thing that actually kind of maybe sort of happened, reported on by Rolling Stone and then others eventually. What's the history of this, the provenance of this? I guess we're once again former Trump White House officials are talking and spilling the beans on how weird, dumb, scary, whatever, pick your adjective, Donald Trump really was as president of the United States, if you can believe he was that. Rolling Stone piece here by Aswin Subsang, whose name we are now mispronouncing in association with a different publication, I see, and Adam Ronsley, whose name I may or may not be pronouncing correctly. Trump kept asking if China was shooting us with a, quote, hurricane gun. A hurricane gun. The then leader of the free world, believe it or not, also inquired whether the U.S. could bomb China in retaliation for the alleged hurricane attack. You've no doubt heard the story, I guess, by now, and at least gotten the gist of it. Well, I don't know if there's anything to be gained by wringing out the wet laundry here, but maybe there's some extra. But if you didn't hear it, boy, oh boy, what a, I don't know what. It's not really a revelation. The bottom line, Donald Trump is dumb and weird and conspiratorial minded and just not very strong thinker in general. And he falls prey to very, very dumb ideas / conspiracy theories about what people are doing. And it leads to, moments of real danger for the world. And, as we keep asking, or keep reiterating, history will one day demand to know why we didn't hang Trump. And I guess it wouldn't be over his actual use of nuclear weapons, but I guess ponder that as he considers running for office again. That at some point Donald Trump thought he might be able to he might get positive feedback from his advisors about his notion that we should go to war, open war with China, because he believed, why? Don't know. Doesn't matter. That China was controlling the weather and sending hurricanes to the United States, and that's the real issue here, isn't it? Near the beginning, it says here in the actual article, near the beginning of Donald Trump's time in office, the then president had a pressing question for his national security aides and administration officials. Does China have the secret technology, a weapon even, to create large man-made hurricanes and then launch them at the United States? And if so, would this constitute an act of war by a foreign power, and could the U.S. retaliate militarily? Then President Trump repeatedly asked about this, according to 2 former senior administration officials and a third person briefed on the matter. And I don't mean to scare every last bit of crap out of you, but I guess given yesterday's show, we have a tradition to live up to here. But just, in terms of how close did we really come to all of this making a difference? Like, everybody's sort of thinking the back of their minds, well, at least we escaped it. At least there were adults in the room that prevented it from happening. And that's kind of true, but it didn't prevent it from happening. It did happen. They are reporting about it, but they prevented, I guess, prevented other people from saying, yes, Mr. President, there really are hurricane guns in China, and they really are shooting hurricanes at us, and we really must retaliate or else we'll have lost face here. Let's go to the nuclear weapons. So, again, not to totally scare the crap out of you, but this is cited here in the beginning of this article as having happened near the beginning of Trump's time in office. There was a time, it might have been too brief for it to have overlapped with this, but but for various other things that intervened and undid possibly a very potent combination here. Let's not forget that also near the beginning of Trump's time in office, Mike Flynn was his national security advisor. And before we were able to reveal to the world all of the crazy and stupid things he did and believed in, and thereby convinced the earlier version of Donald Trump as president to jettison Mike Flynn, we really might have dodged a bullet on that one. Now, the window was small. I mean, don't forget that by the end, Donald Trump had already floated possibly bringing Mike Flynn back as a national security advisor. And that in the interim, during the period when he really was contemplating that, we had to bring him to trial for, and get at least was the trial judge in Flynn's case that said, why isn't he charged with treason in this? Or was that Roger Stone thing? It's hard to separate them in my head now. But, we had very serious questions. And then, of course, he had to pardon Flynn to get him out from underneath all of this. And why would you pardon him if you didn't, have some designs about possibly bringing him back in if you were to somehow win / steal the next election? But can you imagine, what if the question of, is China shooting us with a hurricane gun and should we react militarily, was posed to Mike Flynn, who was then still seriously considered the national security advisor. That could have been extraordinarily dangerous. How close did we come to having that happen? I don't know. By the way, there's also a whole other, I think, level of analysis to all this, which is, I'm sure the environmentalists and climate change activists among you are screaming about this too. Like, Trump finally comes to acknowledge that there's an unusually high number of extraordinarily powerful hurricanes happening. And everybody's offering him like a scientific, real explanation for it. Climate is changing. There's all kinds of reasons for that, chiefly man-made. There are things we might still be able to do to reverse the trend, but in the meantime, it's intensifying both the number and the power of these storms. But he acknowledges that there is such a phenomenon, but in his mind, he has to invent something completely different because he's so committed to not recognizing climate change theory. He has to come up with an alternative theory, and it never occurs to him, no Occam's razor going for Donald Trump. He can't see that maybe a better explanation for this than that China controls the weather is that global warming, climate change influences, if not controls, the weather. That's, you would think, be easier to accept and understand, but not for Donald Trump. Plus, just to make things worse, couldn't we also throw in a war with China over it? And it may be a fact that maybe it's something else that's driving it entirely. I want to have that confrontation with China, so I'll reverse engineer the only explanation that allows me to both deny climate change theory and get to that war with China. If I accept the climate change theory, which seems to be easier for explaining the hurricanes, then I lose my prize of war with China. Like, what do we have to cooperate with China or something to try and slow down climate change. That's the opposite of what I want. So you land on this instead. Isn't it possible that aliens from the moon are doing all of this? If he had a long-standing desire to blow up the moon, then I imagine that he would land on that theory instead. So back to what they have collected in Rolling Stone. It was almost too stupid for words, said a former Trump official intimately familiar with the then sitting president's inquiry. I did not get the sense he was joking at all. And apparently later it evolves into a joke somehow, but so that explains it all. And that's why everybody can just walk away and wait 4 years and then spill the beans to Rolling Stone later about it. But okay, it was so stupid. It was too stupid for words, so I didn't use any words to tell anybody until it was too late to do anything about it. The sources, who spoke on condition of anonymity, of course, to discuss private conversations, tell Rolling Stone that Trump began interrogating national security officials and other staffers about the alleged weapon during the first year of his presidency, and his question would pop up sporadically until at least 2018. Two of the sources recalled that as Trump got deeper into the second year in his term, he started to drop the topic and occasionally joked about it as cover, I guess. I was just kidding back then. But it took him a year to figure out there's no Chinese hurricane weapon. Good old commander-in-chief. In certain circles within the upper ranks of Trumpland, the then leader of the free world's query became such a mockable occurrence that it became known as the hurricane gun thing. I was present once when he asked if China made hurricanes to send to us, said the other former senior official. Trump wanted to know if the technology existed. One guy in the room responded, "Not to the best of my knowledge, sir." I kept it together until I got back to my office. I do not know where the then president would have heard about that. He was asking around about it at the time. Maybe a little before, he asked people about nuking hurricanes. So that might have been connected. I just thought that was him thinking, I don't know what. I don't know. I suppose you can blow anything up, so we might as well try to blow up hurricanes as well. But maybe that, I was going to say for a second there, maybe that makes a little more sense of that situation. Well, it actually makes less sense, but it does explain it. Anyway, the patently, how do we want to say that one? Boneheaded line of inquiry from Trump, which has not been previously reported, was merely one instance in an administration overflowing with Trump's rampantly absurd conspiracy theory-powered ideas and policy proposals, many of which were ignored or shot down, thus avoiding additional atrocities. Last week, it was revealed that Trump's former Secretary of Defense, Mark Esper, wrote in his new memoir that his ex-boss, wanted to attack Mexico with missiles during peacetime between the two nations, and then try to pin the blame on another country, because there are so many that would be motivated to launch missiles into Mexico. Although, then again, you would say, why would the United States be motivated to launch missiles into Mexico? That's equally crazy. So it's so crazy it just might work. Despite leaving office in disgrace, Trump has continued on as the undisputed leader of the Republican Party, and by far its most popular and influential national figure. He is currently the clear favorite to win the 2024 GOP, or GOP, presidential nomination, should he ultimately decide to launch another campaign. Though a final decision has not yet been made, Trump has strongly to a variety of associates and counselors that he intends to run again, having made it his mission to turn his anti-democratic lies about the 2020 election being stolen from him into party orthodoxy. A Trump spokesperson didn't provide any comment for this story. Let's see, some additional commentary in here. That does not surprise me at all, said Stephanie Grisham, former top Trump aide who has since had a very public break with the Trumps. Though Grisham said she was not privy to the hurricane gun chatter, she simply noted stuff like that was not unusual for him. He would blurt out crazy things all the time and tell aides to look into it or do something about it. His staff would say they'd look into it, knowing that more often than not he'd forget about it quickly, much like a toddler. Perfect for leadership of the free world. Trump's hurricane gun inquiries add to a list of odd beliefs the former president holds, not just about climate science in general, which he has called a hoax, created by and for the Chinese. Now we begin to see at least how his crazy theories tie together. Of course, it's a hoax created by the Chinese. Like, I always wondered, why would the Chinese create such a hoax? And the answer is it's perfect cover for the hurricane gun, right? If we had a hurricane gun, we'd deny something, I don't know. We would say that, it's not our gun that's creating the hurricanes. It's the climate. It's just the planet. And you would say, that's crazy. There's never been hurricanes like that before. And, yes, there have. But also, all prior hurricanes, like before this technology existed, you would acknowledge, I don't know why I would logic Trump, right? But you acknowledge that certainly if such technology existed, we could probably all agree it didn't exist in the early 1900s, right? Or the 1800s. And yet there were hurricanes. Why is that? They may or may not have been less frequent and less intense, but clearly nature is capable of generating hurricanes. Yes? Right? So you don't need a hurricane gun in order for there to be hurricanes. So, to me, that's sort of like the starting point for coming to understand that, maybe hurricanes really could not only be created by nature, but get worse thanks to nature. It doesn't need to be a Chinese impetus behind that, but he wants there to be. So anyway, right. So he believes that climate change is a hoax created by and for the Chinese, but hurricanes in particular, I guess, are an odd thing for him. And how so? Do you remember not only wanting to bomb or nuke hurricanes, but remember that during the 2019 hurricane season, Trump insisted on telling the public that Hurricane Dorian was headed towards Alabama, which no models had predicted, and Trump later appeared with a map that appeared to have been edited to include a projection of the storm hitting Alabama. The incident, dubbed Sharpie Gate for Trump's erroneous marking of a map, led to an Inspector General's report which concluded that the National Oceanic and Atmospheric Administration had falsely backed up Trump's claim about the hurricane's path as a result of White House pressure. Man, infuriating. At times, Trump's comments about possible Wile E. Coyote-style weapons have touched on similarly bizarre ideas mulled by the U.S. during the Cold War. During the 2019 hurricane season, Trump reportedly kept suggesting to aides that the U.S. bomb hurricanes with nuclear weapons in the mistaken belief that the explosions would somehow mitigate or destroy the tropical storms, an idea first floated by eccentric Cold War scientists working on Project Plowshare, which tried to brainstorm peaceful uses for nuclear weapons. All right, whatever. The U.S. Air Force's Project Popeye aimed to use cloud seeding, that is, dropping salts and dry ice into clouds in order to induce rain and snowfall, to try and defeat the insurgency in South Vietnam. The idea behind it was that we could slow down weapons and materials from getting from North to South Vietnam via the Ho Chi Minh Trail by creating a monsoon season year-round so that the trail would be unpassable, explains Vince Houghton, a historian whose book Nuking the Moon chronicles some of the more bizarre failed weapons of the Cold War. Oh, I didn't even know that people really tried that or thought about it. While cloud seeding, well, why am I even reading on about this? But I guess it's interesting background. Good historical lesson. While cloud seeding works to create precipitation, it's sort of like a real thing, it can't create hurricanes, which inflict damage primarily through strong winds and high storm surges rather than rainfall. But China's investment in cloud seeding technology for agricultural production and disaster mitigation has prompted conspiracy theories of the kinds that right-wing fever swamps often use to inform MAGA discourse. More recently, right-wing believers in the QAnon conspiracy theories have taken to arguing that President Joe Biden used a Chinese-made weather weapon to send the freezing weather that crippled Texas power lines as Senator Ted Cruz fled to Cancun, Mexico. I didn't realize there was a connection there. So, okay, well worth that extra paragraph to find that out. Okay. Now you're up to speed on hurricane guns and all the crazy things that have evolved from it. There's more to share. And let's see. Both in Rolling Stone again and also in Politico. But I think Politico broke the story. Let's read a little bit about what's going on with still unarrested John Eastman. Politico story set the pace yesterday. Kyle Cheney behind this one. Quote, provide some legal cover, New Eastman emails shed light on his push to overturn Biden's win. He suggested a way for Pennsylvania legislators to cancel Joe Biden's win, and I guess he's still out there, according to other reports, still working to try to convince Wisconsin, for instance, that they can still recall their electors somehow and negate the Biden win. Kyle Cheney reporting, though, on the original story here for Politico. Attorney John Eastman, and yeah, he's still an attorney, urged Republican legislators in Pennsylvania to retabulate the state's popular vote and throw out tens of thousands of absentee ballots in order to show Donald Trump with a lead, according to newly unearthed emails sent in December of 2020 as Trump pressured GOP lawmakers to subvert his defeat. This recalculation, he posited in an exchange with one GOP state lawmaker, would help provide some cover, that's the quote, help provide some cover for Republicans to replace Joe Biden's electors from the state with a slate of pro-Trump electors, part of a last-ditch bid to overturn the election results. Essentially, he was asking Pennsylvania, or giving them a mechanism by which to find whatever number of thousands of votes that they needed to do to reverse the win, just as Trump was asking Brad Raffensperger to do in Georgia. He just thought that they would do this thing. And I think Trump was asking even later in the process for all this. And so he didn't really have the command of the mechanics of vote tabulation that Eastman had. Plus, it was later in the process, so he wasn't really plausibly able to do this. The Electoral College had already voted, although that might have been the case that they already voted in late December 2020 when Eastman is writing, but it's still closer in time to that and maybe fresher, and he thought that you could do something. But Trump, without that command of the brass tacks, just says, why don't you just change the numbers, essentially. Eastman here is slightly more sophisticated, trying to give them reasons that they could answer press inquiries, for instance. If the press were to inquire, why did the numbers change at all, particularly so late in the game and so dramatically, here are the answers you can give. Like, for instance, we threw out a bunch of mail-in ballots because there were some technical improprieties with them. And, I mean, really, you don't even have to go any deeper than that. But this just shows, I guess, without enough inquiry from the press and enough credulousness from all quarters, you probably don't have to provide a very good explanation. You just say, oh, we counted again. And it turns out we miscounted. Well, what's the evidence for that? Well, I don't know. We have to leave it there. All right. Well, at any rate, this is how the exchange actually went. Eastman suggested that GOP legislators could simply cite their concerns with Pennsylvania's absentee ballot procedures and then use historical data to discount each candidate's totals by a prorated amount based on the absentee percentage those candidates otherwise received. Having done the math, you'd be left with a significant Trump lead that would bolster the argument for the legislature adopting a slate of Trump electors, perfectly within your authority to do anyway, but now bolstered by the untainted popular vote, Eastman wrote in a December 4th, 2020 email, so early December before the Electoral College has met and voted, to Pennsylvania Representative Russ Diamond. That would help provide some cover. Biden ultimately won Pennsylvania by more than 80,000 votes. The exchange was part of a batch of emails obtained from the University of Colorado, where Eastman worked as a visiting professor at the time that he was helping Trump strategize ways to remain in power. The emails were obtained via public records requests by the Colorado Ethics Institute, which sent them along to the January 6th Select Committee last month. This is quite clever. It's unclear whether the Select Committee had previously obtained these emails, which are available via public records requests, or whether they are in receipt of the Colorado group's files. The Denver Post first reported on the existence of the emails, so credit to them. I should have guessed that it wasn't Politico to pick up on it first, but they could have. They do sometimes end up the first to discover these things, but in fact it was the Denver Post. When did they report on that? I will open up the link here just to see. Date on this article, May 10th. So, okay, also yesterday. Politico just picking up on their reporting. All right, the January 6th Select Committee is fighting a legal battle with Eastman in federal court in California to obtain hundreds of emails Eastman sent and received via his other previous employer, Chapman University. Sure moves around a lot for a distinguished scholar. The panel has already won several rounds in this case, obtaining key emails Eastman sent from January 4th to January 7th, 2021, but the panel is still fighting to receive thousands of pages sent in the run-up to January 6th. The Select Committee and Eastman's attorney didn't respond to requests for comment. The emails between Eastman and Diamond show with more granularity the advice Eastman was offering to Republican state lawmakers at the same time he was beginning to author legal filings for Trump at the Supreme Court and in other litigation. He urged Diamond to tweak the language of his proposed resolution in multiple ways and even redlined his proposed resolution. I would also include, after paragraph 3, a specific legislative determination that the slate of electors certified by the governor under the illegally conducted election are also null and void, Eastman suggested. Although Eastman would later go on to suggest that the then Vice President Mike Pence could single-handedly refuse to count Biden's electors, his exchanges with Diamond in early December suggest he hadn't fully embraced the theory that has since come to define his effort to help Trump cling to power. I guess if you were asking for me to explain that, I would say what's going on there might be that he always thought that it would be best if there were foundation established for Mike Pence to do this thing on January 6th. But after a while, having failed to get that foundation established and failing to get the cooperation of Pennsylvania state legislators or any state's legislators to pass the resolutions that he's asking them to pass, declaring their electoral votes null and void, etc., or reversed in some way. Having failed that, then he falls back on, well, Mike Pence could just do it unilaterally. Which, if you're willing to break all the rules, I guess you can always fall back on that one. So I think that probably has more to do with it, more so than his evolving towards the idea that Mike Pence could or should do it unilaterally. He wanted some cover, he just couldn't get it. In another December 4th email, Eastman told Diamond that it would be fruitless for Republican members of Congress to lodge objections to the results to the election because the Electoral Count Act, the federal law that has governed the counting of electoral votes since 1887, required both the House and the Senate to sustain such objections, an impossibility with the Democratic-led House. Yes, that's true. And he refers him to the right place, 3 U.S. Code Section 15. And, so then he had to come up with something to overcome that, and it was either the unilateral action of Pence, with or without boosting from state legislators. Hi, it's me, David Waldman, the same guy who was just talking to you a second ago. Our Patreon subscription drive is still going strong, with over 175 monthly donors who help keep us on the air. If we've helped keep you going during the pandemic, why not return the favor and help us keep going so we can all be together for the next disaster? Patreon.com, Patreon.com, makes it easy to make secure, recurring monthly contributions to support our show. Patreon.com/KagroX gets you straight to our donation page. Maybe you'd like to thank us for keeping you sane during the Trump era. Maybe you're looking forward to in-depth explanations of what's going on in the Biden administration. Whatever it is that keeps you listening, we need your help to keep bringing it to you. And hey, if you happen to prefer using PayPal or even the Square Cash app, we're up and running with those options too. Thanks again, everyone, for all your support. We literally could not do this without you. All right, welcome back now to the Kagro in the Morning Show here on Netflix Radio. I guess we'll continue with the reading of the Politico article, but I did want to pause just for a second to go back and talk about the fact that these articles are based on the discovery of these University of Colorado emails when Eastman was working there as a visiting professor, no less. It's kind of embarrassing, I think, for the university itself. But okay. At any rate, I just thought that was interesting. One, that he's having all of this conversation over their email servers. I mean, I don't know what to say. You remember, of course, everybody remembers but her emails, and the whole controversy there was about Hillary Clinton using a private email server, and that's considered dangerous and unworthy because if you're conducting official business, it has to be conducted through official channels, precisely because official channels are discoverable and archivable, and not only archivable, but are actually archived, and we can get some insight into the decision-making process when that's appropriate. And Republicans, of course, screaming about the use of the private email server as a way of avoiding detection. And then, interestingly, some of them, in fact, did then themselves use their own private servers, and sometimes it has helped them, sometimes it has not helped them avoid detection. Here, Eastman using someone else's email server, the university's, and the university will have some strict rules about who can use their email system and for what purposes. No doubt Eastman would eventually, or maybe even did, try to oppose the disclosure of those emails legally. I don't know whether he knew that there was such a thing, but I mean, it's actually quite a huge oversight. He probably just thought he expected that those emails would stay private because he doesn't for all of his legal scholarship, actually understand the relationship between those communications and who controls them and who owns them. It's the university who says right at the outset, if you're going to use one of our university email addresses, under normal circumstances, we don't care what you're saying. But if you're planning an insurrection against the United States government, and somebody asks for them, well, then we're probably not going to have any particular interest in helping you hide that. And in fact, it's even less. There's even less expectation of privacy than that. If somebody asks for them under Freedom of Information Act equivalent in the state level, we're the University of Colorado, and as we are a public institution, we're probably bound to turn those things over, and we really never had any reason to believe that there was something we needed to hide anyway. We're actually quite shocked to find out that one of our visiting professors is plotting to overthrow the United States government. But even absent that, if it was really literally just your polenta recipes, we'd likewise say, yeah, we don't care. I mean, you can have it. It's University of Colorado property, which basically means it's subject to laws of Colorado. It's a public institution. You never had any expectation of privacy, and the fact that John Eastman forgot that is astonishing. And, okay, what else? I can't help you with much more than that. But it's interesting that he would choose, after no doubt joining the Republicans and railing about the dangers of using a private email server, being that you can hide your activities and decision-making from the public, that he doesn't bother. He's too lazy to use a private email server. I mean, even if he had just used Gmail might have, Google probably would have complied with the subpoena to turn those records over, but it wouldn't have been from a Freedom of Information Act request. It would have required litigation. I don't know. It's just, I guess, put that in the drawer with John Eastman might just not have the legal mind people think he does, or maybe he does. He has the legal mind, the ivory tower legal mind, where all of this is, of course, this is above board. There's nothing to hide. I don't care who has access to it, or I just don't think about those things. My focus is on this and not the practical aspects of hiding my trail, because I don't think like a criminal. I don't feel like I'm doing a criminal thing. I'm upholding the Constitution, or that is to say, I'm doing those things that nowhere in the Constitution does it say I can't, even if I don't necessarily believe that the things are illegal. Anyway, jumping back then to the story where we last left off. Let's see. I forget now where that was. Emails from Eastman to Diamond showing with granularity the advice that Eastman was offering Republican state lawmakers all over the place, urging Diamond to tweak the language of his proposed resolution that would then undo somehow the casting of the electoral votes from Pennsylvania, giving him specific language to do so. So, also there's the acknowledgement from Eastman that by the time the Congress gets around to counting the electoral vote count on January 6th, the usual process of raising objections won't go anywhere because they don't hold a majority in the House, and then the House and Senate together won't agree to undoing or ignoring the electoral votes from Pennsylvania or any other state at that point. In an email to Politico, Diamond described Eastman as, quote, one of many individuals I interacted with in the aftermath of the 2020 general election. He said he's not aware whether Eastman had contacts with other Pennsylvania legislators. He also said he didn't recall Eastman raising anything about Pence's role in the process. Diamond noted that the proposals he exchanged with Eastman were drafts and that, quote, not every idea bounced around in draft form is included in the final product. He added that he believes jealously guarding and preserving the legitimate authority of the Pennsylvania General Assembly should always remain a priority. It's a very fancy excuse, if you ask me. And, something he can stand on. That combined with I don't recall anything might just work. Eastman's theory that Pence could throw out Biden's electors rested on the notion that the Electoral Count Act itself was unconstitutional and therefore could be ignored. And there he has something in common with Armando. He spent the final days before January 6, 2021, pressuring Pence to repeatedly violate provisions of the Electoral Count Act in order to prevent Biden from taking office. In litigation between Eastman and the Select Committee in California, a federal judge ruled in March that Eastman and Trump likely criminally conspired to overturn the election by pushing this concept in the absence of legal support, particularly after no state legislature went along with the plan to override election results and appoint Trump electors. U.S. District Court Judge David Carter described the effort as a coup in search of a legal theory. Yet, on December 4th, Eastman explained to Diamond that the provisions of the Electoral Count Act, the federal law that has governed the counting of the electoral votes since 1887, would prevent Trump from prevailing unless state legislatures acted to replace Biden's electors. He, at this point, I guess, doesn't bother arguing that the Electoral Count Act is unconstitutional, and so therefore something else could perhaps intervene. But he's looking to convince Pennsylvania legislators that they need to act. He wants resolutions from the states on his side to show to Pence, I think, in order to convince him that he can play his part, the part Eastman thinks he should play in this process. He criticized Pennsylvania GOP legislators for sending a letter that day encouraging their congressional delegation to challenge the election results on January 6th because he said the Electoral Count Act required support from the House and Senate. So he's saying, Pennsylvania legislature, I want you to pass a resolution negating your electoral college results. Yes, the electors from Pennsylvania have already voted and cast their votes for Joe Biden. I want the Pennsylvania legislature to say we're recalling our electoral college representatives. They weren't regularly elected and had no business sitting at the electoral college on December 14th or whatever it is and casting those votes. And as the Constitution affords us in the first instance, the right to determine how our electors will be selected, we are undoing it, the method we chose, and by most reckonings would be forced to live with since we chose it ahead of time and then went through with it and had the election. We're operating under the theory that it doesn't matter that we promised the people of Pennsylvania an election and they had the election and we lost. We are saying we still have the right to change our mind after that method that we chose is used, which is highly dubious. But I guess it was so dubious to them that they said, well, how about this? Instead of our doing that, they were clearly uncomfortable with that. Why don't we send a letter to the Pennsylvania delegation to Congress and say, we want you to please object to Pennsylvania's electoral votes being cast this way? And Eastman correctly is saying to them that won't do it, because at best what happens is we break up into House and Senate. At best, the Senate sustains this objection, agrees with this objection, and votes not to count Pennsylvania's votes. But in all likelihood, the House will not agree to do so because it's barely, but there's a bare majority of Democrats in there. They'll vote no. Then there won't be agreement between the two houses, and it won't be effective. So the plan that you have ultimately goes nowhere. If you really want to do something, you got to try my crazy idea instead. During a GOP-led hearing in Georgia on December 3rd, 2020, Eastman similarly alluded to the potential power of the vice president to resolve disputes over electoral votes, but he said the matter was an unresolved issue, with experts going in, quote, both directions. The Eastman batch also included an exchange with two Colorado-based businessmen that occurred days after the attack on the Capitol. In the exchange on January 9th, 2021, Eastman suggested he had previously met with former Overstock.com CEO Patrick Byrne and had been having, quote, high-level meetings about a theory Byrne had espoused. And I don't know whether it's detailed. It's not detailed here in Politico piece because the Politico piece ends. Does the Denver Post have anything about it? I don't know where they would put it if they did, and we don't have time to read through the entirety of the Denver Post reporting on it, although we probably should have started with them because they're the ones that broke the story in the first place. But since everybody's talking Politico, I thought we would end up there. Let's see. By the way, at the ending of the Denver Post piece here, we have, who's Hubbard? Is Hubbard the president of University of Colorado by any chance? It's not clear. I'm going to have to scroll back a little bit and take a look. Although, here they speak of CU, which would make me think Colorado University, which is different from the University of Colorado, I believe. But, maybe we will have to read through this after all. But perhaps we'll do it tomorrow instead, as we, or maybe we can read it off the air and figure out what's going on. I was going to say whoever it is who's responsible for this comment at the end of the piece says they owe it to Coloradans to conduct a thorough audit of Eastman's CU tenure to determine if the school's connection, wittingly or unwittingly, or to determine the school's connection, wittingly or unwittingly, to one of the darkest days in the history of this country. Hubbard, whoever that might be, said in a statement to the Post, the Denver Post, that should include detailed reviews of his communications, grants, and use of university resources, whether he upheld his required oath to defend the Constitution of the United States, and what steps could or should be taken to avoid this type of situation in the future. Well, I don't even know whether we're ever going to get around to that one or not, but it would be wise to see if we could perhaps prevent this in the future. Here we go. Curtis Hubbard, apparently writer of a memo written by the institutes. Which institute? I don't know. It's up here somewhere. Colorado Ethics Institute, I guess. Hubbard is a Democratic political consultant and partner with On-Site Public Affairs, apparently. So it wasn't a university official writing this, which might have been a little bit more surprising. All right, well, I'll digest what was in the Denver Post story perhaps off the air. In the meantime, running low on time again today, so I want to turn to a slightly different story. This I thought was of some interest here in particular on the show between me and Armando, always talking about the Trump Hotel escapades. One of the most infuriating facial violations of the Constitution of the entire Trump administration, and yet the one about which it sometimes seems they're doing the least. Although there's an awful lot of litigation and fighting going on around it, it never really seems to get to the heart of the matter, which is that, well, one, he should never have been allowed to retain ownership during his presidency or even transfer it to his kids. The lease, it was explicit in its terms about it's not being permitted to lease the old post office building where the Trump Hotel was. I mean, remember, this was originally the post office, like the Central Post Office of the United States. The old post office building, not used for those purposes anymore. A historic building leased to the Trump organization to convert into the hotel. But like I said, the contract, the terms of the lease always were, even before Trump was elected, the terms of the lease always were no government official can be allowed to be an owner or part owner of any such enterprise, whatever you convert the old post office building into, because it's a government building and remains a government building and is only being leased to someone. So it would be a conflict of interest to lease it to an employee of the same government. And then they only barely bothered to try to come up with some rationale that somehow the President of the United States, the ultimate employee of the government of the United States, wasn't an employee of the government of the United States. And from there, it just got dumber and dumber. And then, of course, fell straight into a facial violation of the emoluments clauses, both of them, of the Constitution. And we all stood around, and it was like basically like someone's committing treason right in front of your face. But because it's so rare, and we always say that there's such stringent requirements for proving treason, that when somebody actually commits it in front of us, our first instinct is to say, that's not happening. That can't be what's really going on here. And we just did that with the emoluments clauses. And it's like, there's no emoluments clauses anymore, at least for that guy. And, one of the more infuriating things. Anyway, this piece from Government Executive magazine, which is really government exec or govexec.com now, has this piece. Lawmakers want to know more about the Trump hotel sale. Remember now that they're done using it as a conduit for illegal emoluments. They want to sell this white elephant off, the Trump organization. And they have some questions about it. They are questioning the premium $375 million price for the lease acquisition, apparently. Courtney Buble, like Michael Bublé, it's pronounced or spelled the same way, so we're pronouncing it the same way. Courtney has this to say on behalf of Government Executive. Top House lawmakers. Top men is, of course, the Indiana Jones thing is what I thought of. Top House lawmakers would like to know more about the firm poised to take over the lease for the Trump Hotel in Washington, D.C., which has been met with scrutiny and criticism over the years. How interesting is this? Now they're going to scrutinize the person or organization taking over the lease, because lesson learned, when we didn't look, the President of the United States stole a bunch of money through and laundered emoluments from foreign governments and domestic actors alike, and violated facially the terms of the lease. But now, the second time around, we're definitely not going to let that happen. We're going to inquire ahead of time, and then maybe let it happen. The Trump Organization is in the process of transferring the lease for the hotel, located in the old post office building, to the Miami-based investment group CGI Hospitality Opportunity Fund 1, LP. That 1, Roman numeral 1 at the end, helps trigger thoughts of private equity shenanigans, which, again, I promise you we'll end up getting back to sometime later. Well, I shouldn't promise this week, but at any rate, what I mentioned to you about Mother Jones doing a whole issue on this. So, good primer or background to be found there, I am sure. The General Services Administration, which manages the lease, barely, because they didn't even read the part about not leasing to a government official, or didn't honor it anyway, finished its review of the proposed sale in March, as outlined in a 21-page document, herein linked. Officials determined that CGI was a qualified transferee based on an internal and third-party review. The reported price of the lease, $375 million. I'll just point out that they thought Trump was a qualified transferee too, and he abso-effing-lutely was not. So, take that for what it's worth. While the review examined the proposed buyer's financial capacity and other factors such as its business reputation, experience in owning and operating hotels, and capability to manage historic properties, it did not fully explore the identities of all the investors in the CGI Hospitality Opportunity Fund or former President Trump's potential conflicts of interest related to the sale. House Oversight and Reform Committee Chairwoman Representative Carolyn Maloney of New York and Jerry Connolly of Virginia, chairman of the committee's Government Operations Panel, subcommittee, that is to say, wrote to Raul Thomas, CEO of CGI Merchant Group, on May 6th. CGI Merchant Group manages CGI Hospitality Opportunity Fund 1, which plans to turn the Trump Hotel into a Waldorf Astoria, which is a luxury hotel brand from Hilton. Certain experts previously indicated that the $375 million price tag represents a significant premium over market rates for a hotel that, according to documents obtained by the committee, reported losing tens of millions of dollars since it opened in 2016. The lawmakers wrote, notably, this sale price is 10% higher on a per room or per key basis than the highest price ever recorded for a Washington, D.C. hotel of any kind, anywhere, right? Anywhere in the city. The most expensive, most profitable hotel being transferred, the lease being transferred in D.C. ever, is 10% lower than what they're asking for this money-losing white elephant. So you might wonder, why is so much money, why was Hilton propose handing so much money over to Donald Trump? Additionally, even accounting for the Trump organization's poor investments into the property, prior investments, also probably poor investments into the property, the sale price will reportedly yield the Trump organization a profit of at least $100 million, of which approximately 3/4 would flow to former President Trump, they wrote. So it's $75 million directly into Donald Trump's pocket. So is it legit? Maloney and Connolly requested a list of information from CGI by May 20th, including the identities of individual investors in CGI Hospitality Fund and a list of all the members of the Trump family who were either directly or indirectly involved in any part of the negotiations for the lease sale. GSA values its relationship with Congress and looks forward to continuing to work with the committee on this and other matters, Christina Wilkes, GSA spokesperson, told Government Executive when asked for comment. CGI did not respond to comment by the time of the article's publication. Additionally, the Trump organization did not respond immediately for comment. Eric Trump, the former president's son, who was an executive vice president of the Trump organization, quote, repeatedly pointed out that the hotel donated to the U.S. Treasury any profits collected as a result of stays by foreign government officials at the hotel and took other steps to avoid ethics questions such as not actively soliciting business from foreign governments, unquote. The New York Times reported last month. But, of course, that was from Eric Trump, and so very likely not entirely true and probably shouldn't be accepted at face value. And really, I don't think we ever saw any serious accounting of either the foreign expenditures at the hotel or the donations allegedly made to the Treasury, and never really got a chance to see whether they matched or made any sense. Maloney and Connolly said their concerns have only increased following the news last week that the Trump Organization and Trump's inaugural committee agreed to pay $750,000 to settle a lawsuit brought by the D.C. Attorney General, which alleged, of course you know about this, that the committee overpaid the hotel illegally for the 2017 presidential inauguration. Attorney General Karl Racine said the funds will be redirected to two nonprofit organizations that promote civic engagement for youth in D.C. Trump said in a statement released by his office that there was absolutely no omission of liability or guilt and claimed this was yet another example of weaponizing law enforcement against the Republican Party. Virginia Cantor, Chief Ethics Counsel at Citizens for Responsibility and Ethics in Washington, told Government Executive on Monday that the Oversight Committee is justified with this inquiry, not only for learning about the premium sales price for the hotel that has been losing money, but also to find any national security issues to the location of the hotel on Pennsylvania Avenue between the U.S. Capitol and the White House. Additionally, it must be determined if any sanctioned Russian individuals, because of Russia's invasion of Ukraine, or other bad actors, are involved at all in the sale. Cantor suggested that the House committee also investigate other bidders on the hotel and their offers to see if the sale price offered by CGI represented a fair market value or an inexplicable premium payout to President Trump and his family members as he exited office. The Trump Hotel has attracted much criticism and scrutiny for allegations of conflicts of interest with then-President Trump and violations of the emoluments clauses, I would say, because he never fully divested from his business interests as well as its financial woes. Last month, Cantor told Government Executive that overall there's no question he should never have been permitted as president to retain an interest in the hotel, and it was a failure on the part of the GSA not to police that more effectively, or to bounce his effing butt straight out of there from day one. Even while he was still a candidate, it should have been clear that they were going to have to do this. Understatement of the year. In his newsletter of May 5th, Walter Schaub, who served as Office of Government Ethics Director from January 2013 until July of 2017, and now is at the Project on Government Oversight, wrote, "It's too late to go back and change the past, but Congress has done little to prevent a repeat of this travesty in the future. The House passed the Protecting Our Democracy Act, which would prohibit presidents from contracting with the federal government and further clarify the emoluments clause. But now the Senate must act, said Schaub. So the Senate may or may not act, but who cares? The lease said explicitly that it couldn't be leased to a government employee, and then they just went ahead and did it anyway. So what the hell? Who cares? The emoluments clause in the Constitution says what it says, but what the hell? He went ahead and did it anyway. He offered up some kind of an excuse. Well, we'll donate the money. Well, will you show us an accounting? I mean, how do we know you're going to donate the money? Don't worry about it. I'll donate the money. And if I don't, I'll still say after the fact, or instruct my children to say, hey, I donated the money. So what's the problem here? And the answer is Trump and paperwork. I don't know that you donated any of that stuff. I don't know that the numbers that you said you took in are the numbers that you said you donated. None of this stuff holds up to scrutiny, and I haven't seen the paperwork anyway. Still one of the most ridiculous and egregious things. I mean, I don't know how to put it any other way. I've put it 100 times this way, and so many times, in fact, that I've forgotten to roll our outro music. But you can't put it any plainer than this. You're not allowed to take these emoluments. It's in the Constitution. But he took the emoluments. But I gave them away. But how do I know you gave them away? Because I said so. But is that enough when you're talking about the Constitution? And should we ever have arrived at this point in the first place? Why, oh, why in the world didn't they bounce out and just, I don't know, prosecute, arrest the director of the GSA who just stood there and said, this word doesn't mean what you think it means. It means something completely different. And I guess if that happens to you early on, the idea that you can then call state officials and say, why don't you just say the vote totals were different numbers and that I won, is something that would make sense to you. And I guess if you can't quite make that leap, what if in the time in between you're asking about whether or not the fact that there are more and more intense hurricanes happening in the world isn't really the product of a Chinese hurricane gun, and can't we nuke them? Okay, this guy, oh my God, I don't know what to tell you. I don't need to change your mind about it though. So anyway, we're all on the same page, and we'll stay there too, and we'll come back and read more from this page tomorrow. But in the meantime, a story or two from Justice Putnam.
NetworksRadio.com. You have been listening to Kagro in the Morning with David Waldman.
Exciting stories to share with you, of course, include Senator Whitehouse explaining how Brett Kavanaugh was not properly vetted and the FBI was not allowed to do a proper supplemental background investigation. We all know that to be the case. I'm glad he's never let go of that. Whether it bears any fruit, who knows? But listen to the story next.